On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Brian Chee and Mr. Curtis Franklin back on the show today. Now, generative AI is the new craze, and the publishing world is being flooded with it, but the Copyright Office is not going to take it anymore. We'll talk about what that means. Now, real-time data processing could literally change your business. Today, we have CEO Materialize Arjun Narayan, and he's going to talk about the technology behind real-time processing and the ability to transform your business as we know it. You definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 535, recorded March 17th, 2023. Clouds materialize. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, you can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/TWiT and book a demo today. And by Cisco, orchestrated by the experts at CDW. When you need to get more out of your technology, Cisco makes hybrid work possible. CDW makes it powerful. Learn more at cdw.com/Cisco. And by Thinks Canary. Detect attackers on your network while avoiding irritating false alarms. Get the alerts that matter. For 10% off and a 60-day money-back guarantee, go to canary.tools/TWiT and enter the code TWiT in the How Do You Hear About Us box. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through the big world of the enterprise. I can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals and the experts, so their very own principal analyst at MDA. He's the man who eats and sleeps the enterprise and security. He's our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how's your week, my friend? And you got a busy week coming up, right?
I've had a busy week, and I've got more busy weeks on tap. There are the spring show season. Conference season is starting, ranging from Enterprise Connect next week here in Orlando. We've got MegaCon coming up, which is not so much an IT conference, but it is, full disclosure, it is produced by the same company that owns Omdia. After that, we've got some vendor conferences, and then the first really big security conference of the season. We've got RSA conference in San Francisco coming up towards the end of April. So I'm getting ready for some of those. Got publications coming out, just all sorts of entertaining things happening. And once in a while, I try to do things like sleep. So, you know, it's a full dance card.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back for sure. We will also have to welcome back our favorite network guy and also all-around tech geek. He's our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, how are you doing, my friend? How's the Orlando Fairgrounds?
Right now, I gotta go and try and force an expenditure of a little money. I really and truly want to go and start on the project of getting fiber optics strung. Now, interestingly enough, a byproduct of this mad rush for consumer fiber optics, fiber from the curb, is really doing a good job of driving the cost of fiber optics down. There's a class of fiber called FTTH. Basically, it's a figure 8 cable, where one part of the figure 8 is a steel messenger wire, then the fiber embedded in the plastic, and then the last is a aramid yarn strength member. And the cool thing is you can actually just kind of split it apart very easily with a knife and have a clamp on a pole. So as the fiber goes by, you just stick it into a clamp, crank it down, and just keep going. Oh. And that'll make it a lot easier for me to go and string fiber to some of the buildings around the fairgrounds.
Amazing. That sounds very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, it's funny. The fiber is actually now cheaper than Cat 6.
That's the truth. I can tell you, I bought some just recently to even just at a consumer price, and I'll tell you, it was it's much more expensive. I was really kind of blown away. It's all the shielding they do now.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Cheebert. Well, welcome back. We should definitely get started. Lots to talk about here in the enterprise this week. Generative AI is the new craze, and the publishing and copyright world has been flooded with a ton of content. You've probably seen some of it. The U.S. Copyright Office is not going to take it anymore. We'll discuss exactly what's going on there. Real-time data stream processing could literally change your business. Today, we have CEO of Materialize, Arjun Narayan. We're going to talk about the tech behind real-time processing and the ability to potentially even transform your business as we know it. So definitely stick around. Lots to talk about there. But before we do, let's go ahead and jump into this week's news blips. Organizations and users have gotten used to being notified when a breach has happened and having to be okay with the data hitting the wind. The question is, should be asking yourself, in fact, should you be desensitized to that? Well, some people haven't been, because according to this Legal Scoops article, a class action suit has been filed against PayPal's data breach. Now, back in January, PayPal admitted that a data breach in December compromised personal and financial information of over 35,000 users. They did send out notices to users around January 19th, but the data loss was pretty extensive. In fact, it leaked names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, date of birth, social security numbers, bank information, and account balances. Yikes. The missing information here is the fact that the login credentials used by the hackers were obtained from PayPal, not from PayPal's network, but from some undisclosed source. Hey, but they did provide free credit monitoring for a short term to the affected users. I guess that's the glass half full part. Now, most of the users, however, have the glass half empty here. There's now a class action suit against PayPal for breach of contract, breach of an implied warranty, negligence, invasion of privacy, and unfair business practices. It also demands that PayPal implement better security measures to prevent future data breaches. Now, guys, am I allowed to clap during these blips? Like, I wish I could just sit here and clap, because, the fact is, will this make an impact? I don't know, but I hope it does, because companies need more reasons to disclose their data breaches. Now, some of the plaintiffs claimed their credit history and money were actually impacted before all the disclosures and the heartfelt apologies by PayPal. Now, if anyone can erode consumer trust, it's how corporations handle breaches responsibly. Now, companies must take data security seriously, and they need to invest into more robust technologies and practices to protect their customers' data. They need to also be transparent and accountable when data breaches occur, and provide timely notification and remediation to the affected users. But unfortunately, so far, only a select few have really done this well. Let's hope suits like these are a signal for others to do better.
So I have a story today that helps dispel two common myths about malware. The first myth is that all malware today is the result of huge budgets and large professional programming teams on the part of the malware authors. The second is that all the action from malware takes place within a few seconds of infection and persistence. So what exactly is this myth-busting story? Winter Vivern, also known as UAC-0114, is a politically motivated cyber threat group that you don't hear about very much, and it's made something of a comeback in recent months with campaigns against government agencies and individuals in Italy, India, Poland, and Ukraine. The organization has been active since at least December 2020, with initial activity in 2021, but the group has remained out of the public eyes in the years since. In an article at Dark Reading, we read that Tom Hegel, senior threat researcher at Sentinel-1, reported on the group and emphasized its close alignment with global objectives that supports the interests of Belarus and Russia's governments. In his opinion, it should be classified as an advanced persistent threat, or APT, even though its resources aren't on the par of its other Russian-speaking peers. In his report, Hegel says that Winter Vivern, whose name is a derivative of the wyvern, a type of biped dragon with a poisonous pointed tail, is a category of, I love this, scrappy threat actor. The group's most defining characteristic is its phishing lures, usually documents mimicking legitimate and publicly available government literature, which drop a malicious payload upon being opened. The group's most tongue-in-cheek tactic, though, is to disguise its malware as antivirus software. Oh, those scrappy malware folks with their senses of humor. Like many of their other campaigns, the fake scanners are pitched through email to target as government notices. Most common payload in recent months has been Aperitif, a Trojan that collects details about victims, establishes persistence on a target machine, and beacons out to an attacker-controlled C2 server located offshore. Taken as a whole, Winter Vivern straddles the line, separating low-end APT groups from hacktivists. Whichever they are, though, their story is a good reminder not to assume that all APT groups are large and in charge. Sometimes those scrappy little troublemakers can cause us some serious problems.
This Ars Technica article might actually sound familiar. It's because it's not that original. Anyway, so in this case, they're calling it Moongate. And the Samsung fans are kind of mad about how the AI processing is happening to photos of the moon. So here's what's happening. If you take a photo of the moon on a Samsung device, it will return a detailed photo of the moon. Some people are mad about this. The issue is that Samsung's software fakes some details the camera can't really see, leading, in this case, a Reddit user called iBreakPhotos to accuse the company of faking moon photos. The user's post claims to be able to trick Samsung's moon detection, and it went viral enough that Samsung's press site had to respond. Good article. So what this is the article really reminds me of when a certain PC manufacturer added a feature into their PC firmware specifically to take shortcuts when it detected the PC Magazine performance tests. Also, a single case of fudging a test result. This adding of additional detail in only for moon pictures feels similar. The reality is that a smartphone has a teeny tiny camera sensor and can't possibly be expected to produce superb images, and Samsung is certainly not the only phone manufacturer to fudge their results. The article goes on to say that Huawei did something similar, and in the test case, it added craters onto the image of a light bulb. The article does speculate that one must wonder if it's the AI system being too much of a black box. My spin on this is perhaps these systems should offer to display better images that it has found as alternatives to the actual image taken by the phone. I'd compare it to how web search engines will often correct spellings of your search terms, but will display that it's on the results that here's what you're getting with the corrected spelling instead, and giving you the option to redefine the search criteria according to your original spelling.
Continuing with the trend of AI, now deepfakes are concerns for lots of people. The concern is growing even more so for brands and organizations out there. Now, according to this New York Times article, AI might just make this problem more of a reality for some. Now, new altered videos so far, mostly the work of meme makers or marketers. Some have gone viral on social media sites like TikTok and Twitter, but most work by cloning celebrity voices, altering mouth movements to match alternate video and audio, and writing persuasive dialogue. However, this month, there have been some serious situations that are highlighting the onset of a bigger issue. In fact, the question has to be asked, how is this even legal? Now, one example, potentially a company using deepfakes to pretend that celebrities are using and talking about their products. Others are showing even the president calling out policy and law changes that are coming soon. Many of the video clips feature synthesized voices appeared to be using the technology from 11 Labs, an American startup co-founded by a former Google engineer. Now, in November, the company debuted a speech cloning tool that can be trained to replicate voices in seconds. Now, videos are using clone voices created by 11 Labs or similar technology and have gone viral in the recent weeks. Now, many social media companies, including Meta and Twitch, have banned deepfakes and manipulated videos that deceive users. However, the damage could already be done by the time they actually remove the videos. Now, many social media companies will hopefully change their policies in the near future to help this a little bit more. But the question is, how much damage will it need to take effect before real change happens? Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the bites. But before we get to the bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that really ensures unsecured devices can't access your apps. Now, Collide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, Collide can get your entire fleet to an 100% compliance. Collide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture: device compliance. Now think about it. Your identity provider only lets known devices log into apps, but just because a device is known doesn't mean it's actually secure in a secure state. In fact, plenty of devices in your fleet probably shouldn't be trusted. And maybe they're running out, maybe an out-of-date OS version, or maybe they've got unencrypted credentials lying around. But if a device isn't compliant or it isn't running the Collide agent, it can't access the organization's SaaS apps or other resources, and the device itself or the device user can't log in to your company's cloud apps until they've fixed the problem on their end. It's really that simple. Now, for example, a device will be blocked if an employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser, or using end-user remediation helps really drive your fleet to that 100% compliance without overwhelming your IT team. Now, without Collide, IT teams really have no way to solve these compliance issues or stop insecure devices from logging in. Now, with Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet, including Mac, Windows, and even Linux. Now, Collide is unique in that it makes devices compliance part of the authentication process. So when a user logs in with Okta, Collide actually alerts them to compliance issues and prevents unsecured devices from logging in. Now, it's security you can really feel good about because Collide puts transparency back into the game and respect for its users at the center of their products. Now, to sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, a lot less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit collide.com/TWiT to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/TWiT. And we thank Collide for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time for the bites. Now, AI is the topic of the week these days, but the question is, how will it impact industries, especially ones like the copyright sector? It's really unclear. Well, this Ars Technica article talks about how the Copyright Office might be trying to crack down on generated content. Now, as generated AI technologies like GPT-4 and Midjourney have really rapidly become more sophisticated, their creative use has exploded really in popularity across the U.S., and the U.S. Copyright Office has issued guidance this week to clarify when AI-generated material can actually be copyrighted. Now, listen to some of this guidance. Guidance comes after the Copyright Office decided that an author could not copyright individual AI images used to illustrate a comic book because each image was generated by the AI generator Midjourney, not a human artist. Now, in making this decision, the Copyright Office was committed to upholding a lot of things, longstanding legal definitions that authors of creative works must be human to actually register their stuff. And because this, officials confirmed that AI technologies can never be considered real authors. Now, here's some of the guidance. The guidance offers some specifics on what isn't copyrighted eligible when it comes to AI. Now, in fact, anything that's solely generated by prompts with no modifications made, which Copyright Office likens to instructions to like a commissioned artist, these are things like that lack human authorship and therefore cannot be or won't be registered. When an AI, quote, AI technology receives solely a prompt from a human and produces complex written visual musical works and responds, the traditional elements of authorship are determined and executed by the technology, not the human user. And the guidance also explains that based on the office's understanding of generative AI technologies currently available, users do not exercise ultimate creative control on how such systems interpret prompts and generate material. Now, here's the interesting part. As in the case of Midjourney, an author who arranges generative AI into a specific sequence, like designing the layout of a comic book, they can potentially copyright the sequence of images if the arrangement is sufficiently creative. Now, similar logic applies if an author or artist modify the AI generated material and, quote, the modifications meet the standards for copyright protection. Here's an example. It could be modifying an AI image in Adobe Photoshop or altering AI generated audio by using guitar pedals or other cases. All right, guys, first question goes out to you. Maybe it's obvious. How's the Copyright Office even going to know?
Well, I was going to say it's going to depend on a couple of things. In many of the areas where this would be a big issue, the human involved will feel the need to disclose this. And so I think that's one where we're going to depend on a certain level of ethics. But there are some tools out there, oddly enough, AI generated tools that work to discover text that has been generated by AI. I think that we will see a lot more of that coming up in the same way that most college students today and many high school students, if they submit their an essay or long form homework, the teacher or professor will run it through a program that looks for plagiarism. I suspect that running it through one of these packages that does at least a rough cut on whether it is AI generated is going to become standard operating procedure as well.
So I don't think this is quite as cut and dry as the Copyright Office would like it to be. This is not quite the tool that they think it is. So like, for instance, at last year's Maker Faire in Orlando, I had a very confidential conversation with some artists, shall we say. These artists said it has become a very normal thing for them to take line drawings or such, logos and so forth, and run it into something like DALL-E, whatever, to try and find variations on those logos. Might be things like trying to get it to fit on a prop or trying to get it to look a little different, like it's a company logo that has changed over the years. And they're saying it has become a very, very normal thing for them to do, especially when you start making movies. So I got a sneaky hunch that when the Copyright Office starts asking or allowing comment on this, I think Hollywood is going to be jumping in with both feet, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation, if you ask me. And boy, I can see it happening. I definitely love the fact that I can use DALL-E to go variations, trying to get things to fit, try to get things maybe a little different, try to make someone happier with maybe a different version. And I'm wondering, does that mean I don't own the copyright on that creativity anymore? I think that's going to be the big bottom line. And I don't see the Copyright Office having the tools, the money or the energy to be able to go and prevent it right at the beginning. I think it's going to be used more when people come in and say, hey, he stole my design.
Right.
And I think it's going to be I think it's going to be more, these tools are going to be used in court cases when people say a copyright has been violated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the really interesting thing here, I'm curious what you guys think here. I mean, there's a lot of chances and cases where if they even change a pixel to, question is like now copyright eligible, right? I mean, in fact, I just had a conversation with my mother-in-law today about a best-selling author she knows called Colleen Hoover. And they were talking about how there's an author out there that's actually copying her books and content in her books by just changing the names in the books. And like, I think obviously in that case, it makes the book different unless, in some cases. And so that's why I'm curious this interpretation by the Copyright Office is saying, hey, if you change something, if you import into Photoshop, change some things. Like the question is, how much can you change it, or how much do you need to change it in order to really be copyrightable? I think it's, and like you were saying, Brian, the language is kind of, I don't know, muddy in that case.
Oh yeah, and my wife likes the so-called bodice rippers of the, romance novels. And there's been lots and lots of lawsuits being slung around in that industry of people that have wholesale copied plot lines, all kinds of things. Because if you're a big fan, I'm a big fan of science fiction and so forth, you start seeing, wow, someone's reusing that. Wait, he's not the original author. Where'd that come from? I would have thought the Copyright Office would have had a little more practice at this by now, because I know this has been happening. I've heard of all kinds of things happening way back into the 1500s. So,
yeah,
what's going on?
Right. Now, Curtis, if we talk about this from an enterprise perspective, I'm curious about that. Like, obviously, there are businesses that make their dime on making sure that they can copyright things and give out. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the movie industry. Does this make it a much harder problem for the Copyright Office at this point to go and help with some of these cases?
Well, I think we could call this the IP Attorney Continuous Employment Act of 2023, because it's going to keep IP, copyright, trademark, various IP attorneys busy for, years and years to come. There have already been questions because, let's face it, most of the machine intelligence systems that are out there right now, they do less generation of new content than they do compilation. And the question is, if they compile from a bunch of different sources, is it original? Which gets back to the old thing in academic research, that if you steal from one paper, it's plagiarism. If you steal from 100, it's research. And so I think we're going to see that. I have seen formulas in the past, I don't recall what they are, that there are percentages that must be changed in order for a work to be considered a new work. And it varies depending on what we're talking about. Obviously, just changing the names but leaving everything else the same is not a new work. That's been shown to not be a new work. On the other hand, we've already had a case. I know that there was one and possibly two of the science fiction magazines that accept over the transom submissions that had to shut them down earlier this year because they were getting so many pieces that were obviously generated by AI. And as I said, they were uniformly bad. It's not, it wasn't the volume so much as the volume of bad content. So this is going to keep a lot of folks busy, many of them attorneys, going forward. From a corporate standpoint, I suspect that in many cases with larger organizations, sending in something that was purely AI generated and claiming it as your own is going to be a fireable offense if it's discovered, because it's, at least lazy and at most fraudulent when it comes to your employment. Now, here's the thing that I'm going to ask you. I have heard people say that one of the places where AI is actually pretty good is in certain types of code generation. What do you think about AI generated code? I mean, if you were on a team, would you want Move, the Chat GPT bot, as part of your team?
I would say there's an answer to that. I'm going to give it in two parts. One, would I want to code ChatGPT coder developer on my team. No. But what I would want is the help of things like, in fact, I even use Copilot, which is a GitHub a tool that lets you essentially provide you code samples. And in fact, I've looked to try to train GPT around other languages and other frameworks to help provide code to be able to solve some of the tough challenges that maybe I've not done before in code, or use particular algorithms or design patterns in code before, that kind of bridge the gap between going and searching for it and trying to find an example versus actually just giving me the code. And so I say, yeah, I think the productivity aspect of this is pretty impressive. And so I would say I would definitely encourage people to use it more, because it gets you closer to where you need to be. And a perfect example is authentication code. It's usually a blocker to any type of productivity. So like if I want to go use a graph API or an API by a specific organization like Stripe or something, I need to be able to first get the authentication rights, be able to pass tokens back and forth and access the endpoint. And the problem is that code is sometimes complex. It's a handshake of this and a handshake of that. And I need to be able to get the right type of handshake to be able to get the token that I need to access. And so I haven't been productive yet. I've been just waiting on trying to essentially get the code right. And so this bridges that gap by saying, hey, here's the code, just use this. And you can essentially get going with actually being productive and coding things. And I think that's where this will really be helpful. Will it replace an actual developer? I don't think so. Not at least in the short term. Maybe if these get infinitely better, that will be true. But right now, it's just augmentation of a real engineer who knows the difference between bad and good code and the right design patterns and the right tested capabilities and that kind of thing. And even as a good engineer, you have to feed information to it. Like, hey, I want unit testable code that allows the visitor pattern, that allows me to pass reference it, so you still need to describe what you want. So I think that there's a key and aspect to all of this. But I do think on the very baseline of it, it's productivity.
I think this is going to be really interesting, especially if we start getting something like, do me a favor, design me a bridge and, set it up so they can do this, this, and this, and span this river and all that. And then forget to tell them it needs to be made out of steel.
Right.
That's actually been a plot in some science fiction books. So this, I'm going to keep a good watch on this, because this is going to be a great show. Let's get some popcorn.
That's right. Indeed it will. All right. Well, I think we put that one to bed. There's going to be a lot more for us to talk about in AI in the coming weeks, I am sure. But we want to get to our guests, because there's lots of information and lots of interesting topics to talk about there. So we should definitely get to that. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech. And that's Cisco, orchestrated by the experts at CDW. Now, the helpful people at CDW understand that hybrid work continues to evolve, and that your organization really must evolve with it to succeed. Now, with so many options to collaborate remotely, you need a strong and consistent network to empower your workforce and keep them together. Consider a Cisco hybrid work solution designed and managed by CDW experts to deliver the same quality network experience to all your offices, even your satellite ones, connecting your team from pretty much anywhere. Because Cisco Network keeps things flowing smoothly and securely with embedded security, compliance, and multi-factor authentication that protects collaboration among your spread out team. Now, with real-time visibility into distributed application security, user, and service performance, you get a better line of sight into how your network is operating and how better to grow your organization. And Cisco networking levels the playing field, providing access to flexible, high-end collaborative experiences that create an inclusive work environment. When you need to get more out of your technology, Cisco makes hybrid work possible. CDW makes it powerful. Learn more at cdw.com/Cisco. And we thank CDW for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show where we actually get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT riot. Today we have Arjun Narayan. He's CEO of Materialize. Welcome to the show, Arjun.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, we have lots to talk about here, lots of really interesting stuff to talk about. So I'm looking forward to getting there. But our audience comes from all walks of life, all different chapters of their career, and they love to hear people's origin stories. Can you take us through a journey through tech and where it brought you to Materialize?
Absolutely. So I was doing a PhD in computer science at the University of Pennsylvania in distributed systems, and had this recurring journey where I was finding many of the key fundamental work streams or research going on distributed systems were repeating work that had been done decades ago in databases. And that's how I got sucked into databases. And I haven't turned back since.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love to hear those types of stories where you're doing research and it generates an idea and you just have to run with it. That's amazing. Now, this is an interesting topic that we're going to get into, because a lot of organizations, they understand and see the value in being able to manipulate and analyze data in real time. Now, maybe we can start with, what is stream processing and why is it important to the business world?
So stream processing is the ability to work on data that is changing within seconds or sub-second, milliseconds. And increasingly, more and more of the experiences that you and I use in our day-to-day are powered by stream processing. Just think of pulling out your phone and calling an Uber, right? There is some system over there that's keeping track of the real-time locations of all of the available for hire vehicles, and these vehicles are popping on and dropping off as drivers, decide that they want to be available. They end their shift. All of this is happening dynamically. The prices are changing, right? Like this is feeding into a surge pricing algorithm that is deciding on real time. It's matching up supply and demand within your location, within neighboring locations. And then you hit the button and then a car gets assigned to you. That happens within seconds. That car gets routed to you. You get a little real time image of where that car is. All of this is stream processing, right? And increasingly, more and more of the experiences that we have on the internet are powered by stream processing. And I think it's inevitable that the customer expectation, the user expectation, is that everything is always up to date. Batch processing, in contrast to stream processing, typically happens overnight, and that means acting on yesterday's data, which is acceptable for some use cases. But as we start to buy seats for a concert, and those seats are going within less than 5 minutes, as we are clicking on an advertisement for a sneaker that is not going to be there a couple minutes from now. Live inventory tracking, live pricing, and live pretty much everything is the new expectation.
Right. Well, let's talk tech, because I'm really interested about this part of it. And there's actually a lot of stream processors out there today. We talked about Apache Spark. In fact, I know Splunk uses Spark in their back end. I've talked to a lot of engineers at Splunk. There's Storm, there's Tegan, there's others. What's the technology you're using, and what's the differentiator there?
So underneath Materialize is a powerful stream processor in order to do live, up-to-date queries. And the technology here is called Timely Data Flow, invented by my co-founder, Frank McSherry, who begun this research back when he was at Microsoft Research, and then later on as an independent academic before co-founding Materialize. So stream processing is, as you rightly pointed out, a rich field with a lot of complex history and technological evolution. And our take at Materialize is that users should be able to get the power of stream processing without having to manually program these beasts. And so in batch processing, you have all of these amazing pieces of technology where you can write a SQL query and you can get the full power of a scale-out, elastic cloud, multi-core experience, powering and harnessing all of that data and giving you an answer. That's not how streaming is today. You have to write a lot of Java code, a lot of microservices in order to get the power. Even if morally speaking, what you're doing is you're just saying, hey, I have the SQL query. I want it to always be up to date. That democratizes access to harnessing the power of streaming for all of the experiences that we want to build.
So I still have my ACM access. I'm still an ACM member, and I read I think it's called NIAID. That's the project NIAID. So I read a little bit of the research document there. Really interesting stuff. And one thing I noticed is that obviously this requires distributed computing to be able to produce this, obviously. And so what kind of compute is required to be able to process this type of data in real time? I mean, obviously, if there's a large data stream coming in, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of compute power required. Even like some of the AI models that are out there today requires a lot of compute power. So does stream processing, right?
Yes. And if you have large data sets, you are going to have to put a lot of cores to work to have a low latency experience. At the same time, there's a lot of data sets where stream processing is working on a smaller volume of very high value data. So you could think of fraud detection on a payments network, right? The number of payments that are being processed per second, while it's a large number, it's a number that's eminently handleable by a moderately sized computer. It's not like the number of clicks, right? Like there's orders of magnitude fewer payments than there's clicks. And so what's needed is an elastically scalable stream processor. And of course, there's a lot of research that has gone into building elastically scalable stream processors, just as there have been in elastically scalable batch processors. And again, the user experience that I want to bring is for developers to be able to write SQL queries and get the full power of this. Just as today in a cloud data warehouse, you can write a SQL query, and behind the scenes, there's complex microservices elastically allocating compute and putting 1,000 cores to work. Right. But most of the users writing SQL queries in a cloud data warehouse don't really need to know, and that to me is successful infrastructure.
I love that. It's kind of bridging the gap between previous knowledge and being able to utilize more technology using that knowledge. I think it's interesting because obviously Apache Spark, even in the case, we have graph databases like Kusto at Microsoft, you have to learn new languages and structures and semantics and syntax to be able to produce the right outcome in these large data sets and in these data lakes. And I think that knowledge gap is tough to grok because I'd have to go and learn more about the technology and how to do specific things. Sometimes I relate them. I translate what I know in already T-SQL over to what I need to know in these other languages. And it's a hard challenge. In fact, that's why I think AI comes in sometimes to help me out with it. But if I could just use the existing knowledge I already have in SQL and SQL stored procedures to be able to write against these data sources, I think that's super powerful. Are you seeing a lot of organizations having their IT staff and other and their engineers being able to just write queries really quickly and produce better reporting and that kind of thing because of the fact you kind of have that the ability to write normal SQL?
Absolutely. In fact, I would go even beyond, say, SQL. So we take a lot of care at Materialize. The SQL that people write is the Postgres dialect of SQL, right? So there's many flavors of SQL. We go out of our way to present as close as possible to Postgres, which is, in my opinion, or at least in my biased opinion, one of the cleanest dialects of SQL out there, and one that is extremely popular. The problem with a lot of existing frameworks is exactly as you pointed out, they require you to first learn the language of that framework, which, there's only so many frameworks that people can hold in their head. And right. part of the reason we chose the PostgreSQL was a belief that people should not have to learn one more framework. Is it the most polished, most evolved SQL, and there's no improvements that I can think of? Of course not. But at the same time, there's a tax that someone has to pay in order to learn a new thing, and you have to earn the right to propose improvements over time after you've already demonstrated the value that your framework brings, without requiring your users to learn something new just as the price of entry.
Now, I saw a really cool architecture diagram recently about Materialize, and I noticed that you essentially did some re-architecture in the last years. I don't know how far back you did the re-architecture, but it sounds like your storage is now in the back end is now using S3. Is that correct? So you're using S3 clusters to store the data once you actually get the data into the storage layer. Is that right?
Yes. We have a separated compute and storage architecture, which is all the rave these days. It's very valuable because S3 is extremely cheap and extremely infinitely scalable and extremely reliable. And this gives users the best of both worlds, which is they get the absolute lowest cost for storing all of their data. while they get to elastically scale out the compute resources based off of what they actually need to use. This was pioneered. I don't want to say pioneered, but at least popularized by cloud data warehouses that excel at allowing you to dump all your data into S3 and not really worry about the cost of that, which is wonderful for folks' enterprise cloud bills.
Right. I think the one interesting thing I'm curious to dig into now. I normally leave the compliance security questions to Curtis because he's got better questions than I do. But I want to essentially ask the one complaint, because I deal with this a lot. I deal with the fact that I got to work in government clouds. I got to be able to have my service and my storage in places where these organizations need to access it in a compliant way. How does that work for your organization and Materialize? Are you having to have the compute clusters and the data planes and the storage layers all in different clouds all over the world to be able to kind of hit all these different compliance regulations?
So today we are on AWS only, and over time we will be on other large clouds as well. We are in multiple AWS regions and spinning up new AWS regions all the time. But yes, this is one of the pain points of the cloud is where is your data domiciled, right? And that requires us and every other cloud data management solution to really have our A game when it comes to security and compliance, and that's very important.
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge. It's like obviously you have to spin up new places, new storage locations, and you sometimes you can't even get the data from them, so you can't even see what's going on. I mean, it's just a very complex environment when it comes to security and compliance. So I totally get that. Another curious thing before I bring in my co-host back in again, I have 1,001 questions. This is cool stuff. Is the fact that obviously we talked a little bit about Apache Spark. And the one thing that, I think is interesting about them is they try to lower the barrier for people to start using them. And you can host it locally. You can have the cloud hosted version of it. What about Materialize? What's the barrier of entry there? How do you get data on there? How do you start stream processing? Is it good for small, medium, large enterprise? What's the kind of the audience for that?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we're proudest of is the fact that people can be productive within minutes of connecting their data to our cloud platform because the SQL is so familiar that they can just take queries that they've maybe already have running on a batch system or on their Postgres database. A lot of people start with just a single Postgres instance. It's how I would start a new project anyway. And they can take that existing bed of queries that they have and be doing stream processing within a half-hour onboarding. That's one of the I think the most powerful things about Materialize is not asking you to learn something. And we onboard folks onto our cloud platform every single day with the single onboarding call. There's self-service as well for those who don't want to be on call, of course.
Right. Okay, so I think I got to shift a little bit because I think the interesting part here is the fact that you have a good easy barrier of entry. I'm curious about a little bit more about the technology. You talked a little about some scenarios that you were giving. I think it was the Uber scenario. There's also the payment scenario. Now, I have seen architectures out there where they use it kind of an event-based architecture where they essentially throw an event up, a microservice catches it, it goes and does some work, and eventually the data will make it to a backend and be stored somewhere. So they kind of hand off these events to each other, and they kind of have a chain of responsibility, do some things with them, and then again, maybe eventually it gets persisted or cached somewhere. How is this different? Should people use this instead?
I would say that most microservices, or many microservices, a large fraction of microservices, don't need to be full-fledged microservices. This isn't an attack on all microservices, right? So what we want to do with Materialize is make it easy for users to build, maintain, and evolve the bottom 80% of microservices that are, morally speaking, just materialized views over some other set of input data that's just constantly streaming it, right? So take a fraud detection microservice, right? You're looking at the stream of stuff that's happening and then coming up with some fraud categorizations. This is, morally speaking, a materialized view. Take a bill. A bill is a materialized view over the audit log of resources that were spun up and spun down. We want to take care of the low-hanging fruit to leave users to specialize on the top 20% where it's truly differentiated, right? And that depends on your application. But it's similar to databases, right? Databases don't make your backend server obsolete. You still have a backend server. What you're doing is you're no longer worrying about, do I have to keep sorting my data so I can efficiently access it? That's what the database does, the heavy lifting for you, takes care of the 80% of data movement and data storage so that you can focus on that set of logic that truly needs to be bespoke, custom logic that doesn't quite fit SQL.
Well, I do want to bring my co-host back in, but before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Thanks to Canary. Now, everyone knows about honeypots and how good of an idea they are. I've used them before. They are fantastic. So why don't you and all of your internal networks run on them? That's a good question, right? Well, simple, because with all of our network problems, nobody needs one more machine to administer and one more to worry about. Well, we know the benefits that honeypots can bring, but the cost and effective effort of deployment always drop honeypots to the bottom of the list of things to do. Well, Thanks Canary changes this. Canaries can be deployed in minutes, even on complex network architectures, giving you all the benefits without the admin downsides. And the Canary triggers are simple. If someone is accessing or trying to lure your files or brute forcing your fake internal SSH server, you have a problem, right? Well, Canary uses deceptively uncomplicated, high quality markers of trouble on your network. And here's how it works. Simply just choose a profile for the Canary device, such as a Linux box or Windows box, a brand name router. And if you want, you can actually further tweak the services for your Canary to run on. You may even be able to use a specific IS server version or open SSH or a Windows file share with actual files constructed accordingly to your naming scheme. Now, lastly, you register your Canary with the hosted console for monitoring and notifications. Then you sit back and wait. Attackers who have breached your network, malicious insiders, and other adversaries make themselves known by accessing your Canary. Now, there's a little room of doubt, but if someone browsed a file share and opened a sensitive looking document on your Canary, you'll immediately be alerted to the problem. View testimonials at canary.tools/love and see why customers on all 7 continents love their Thanks Canaries. Deploy your birds and forget about them. They remain silent until needed. Get one alert via email, text, Slack, webhook, or syslog whenever it matters, when it matters. Visit canary.tools/twit. And for just $7,500 per year, you'll get 5 Canaries, your own hosted console upgrades, support, and maintenance. And if you use code TWIT in the How to Hear About Us box, you'll get 10% off the price for life. Thanks Canary has incomparable value, but if you're unhappy, you can always return your Canaries with their 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. However, during all the years TWiT has partnered with Thanks Canary, their refund guarantee has never needed to be claimed. Visit canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Do You Hear About Us box. And we thank Thanks Canary for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Arjun Narayan. He's the CEO of Materialize, and we're talking about real-time data stream processing and the tech behind it. A lot of interesting stuff here, but I do want to bring my co-host back in too, because they have a lot of interesting topics and questions to cover. I want to start with Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis.
Thank you very much. Arjun, I've got a question, because sort of the holy grail for database work has forever been unlimited, high-speed response, ad hoc queries. You know, anyone can ask any question at any time. Is that where you're going? Is that one of the use cases that if the CEO asks a truly off-the-wall question involving complex data, you can go ahead and using Materialize, give them an answer in 4.3 seconds?
No. And I'm glad you asked this question, because there's always a trade-off, right? Like, there is the speed of light in which you process data. If you come up with a completely new data, a completely new question for which we've never built any of the relevant indexes that we would want to have built to answer that question quickly, we're going to have to process that data. And if we're talking large amounts of data, there is a certain lower bound amount of time that will be needed. Where Materialize shines is when you ask a question the second time. And if you think of most data processing, the questions are not changing every second. The questions are following some programmatic form. The questions are oftentimes repeated. It's just that there's new data. There's the next second's worth of data. Think of a fraud alert or a risk limit. It's the underlying transactions that are going on at high volume, and we want to know as soon as some threshold is triggered. That's the same query, different data. So I'm glad you asked that question. Cloud data warehouses shine, OLAP warehouses shine at answering novel questions on a static data set. So you don't upgrade, you don't change the data more than once a day, but they really are designed to process as fast as possible a novel question. What their weakness is the flip side of our strength, which is if you ask the same question a second time and only 0.1% of the data has changed, they have no choice but to grind over all of that data again, spending your time and your money, spinning up resources. And that's where we really excel, because we do work proportional to the amount of data that's changed, not the entire data set, which really comes in handy for data sets that are changing very quickly.
Okay, so you mentioned a great little code phrase in there, and I want to dig into that. Traditionally, we've had OLAP, online analytics processing databases. We've had OLTP, online transaction processing. OLAP is making queries of data that doesn't change very often. Transaction processing is stuff that's changing constantly. Is Materialize, by being an intermediary, something that can help bridge that? Is it one so that people don't have to have as many back-end databases to still get good use of that data?
I think, yes, it absolutely bridges the OLTP and OLAP worlds. It allows you to have OLAP views kept up to date at OLTP timescales. Now, this only works if your query is fixed, right? So for a fixed set of queries or views, technically, it can keep up to date at OLTP timescales as the underlying data changes. In fact, a dominant source of data coming to Materialize today from our users is change data capture coming out of OLTP databases, be that Postgres or Oracle or SQL Server. And then within milliseconds or sub-second, we have the views up to date, which is very valuable for these real-time experiences, as we've talked about. This doesn't eliminate the need for an OLAP warehouse, because as you pointed out earlier, you have certain exploratory workflows where you're slicing and dicing data. In fact, when you're slicing and dicing data, you actually don't want the data to change, because you're trying to hold as many dimensions of this thing fixed as you're just trying to figure out what's going on. And so a batch OLAP warehouse is not something that's going to go away. It's just a tool that is today being used to run repeated pipelines in a way that's very inefficient, because when all you have is a cloud native hammer, everything looks like a nail.
And those cloud hammers are going to be the death of us yet, I'm sure. But, one last question before I hand things over to my colleague, Brian. Over the past decade or so, we've seen a number of different attempted solutions to the data problem. One that I'm very familiar with is, for example, SAP's HANA database. I have had the pleasure of sitting through a number of hours explaining what that's all about. And it's a combination of re-architecting the back end and writing an 8-figure check for RAM on your server. Is there a reason? You've talked about some of the reasons you went with an intermediary rather than a basic re-architecting of the database itself. Do you think that ultimately Materialize will lead to a re-architecting of the database, something on the back end that optimizes the fit with Materialize, or is your mission to not require that no matter what happens?
I would say that our mission is to work with real-time data no matter what the source is. And what our recommendation would be, or my personal recommendation, is that you almost certainly want to land new pieces of data in an OLTP database somewhere. What they really shine at is data integrity, making sure that all of your rows, all your transactions process in some order so that your rows are not violating certain data constraints. That is where your data should land. It's a question of the use cases that happen from that moment onwards, which are these views that power all these other services that Materialize really is going to help you orchestrate.
Oh, my turn, I think. Yeah. Okay, Arjun. My background is, I've got a background in physical oceanography, and one of our biggest problems is how to deal with time series data. Don't know if it's even appropriate in this case, but anytime some database person sticks the word time in there, I go and haul out this question and say, can I say there might be a better solution than flat files for my physical oceanographer friends? And to illustrate just the kind of data that I'm looking at, I'm going to ask Anthony to switch over to a feed from my underwater observatory that I work on. And if you can scroll down, if you could click here for the real-time integrated audio and then press play, that's actually a visualization. It's called a waterfall display, and it's data, lots and lots of it. But it's very consistent, and I want to be able to go and say, we have the tools to search for occurrences, but we don't have tools to optimize searching the data. Should I shut up and go to my next question, or is this something that maybe might work nicely for Materialize to work on?
So this is a great question. There are two kinds, in my view, of time series use cases, one that is appropriate and one that are not. The one that is appropriate is when you want some real-time view over this fast-changing data that is changing with time, some kind of aggregation, some kind of concise representation that's always up to date. There's a second type of query that we are not purpose-built for, but there are other databases. And I almost got to this point in response to Kurt, but then I held it back as I was droning on for too long. But one of the nice things about the cloud is you can use the database that's purpose-built for the task that you have, and you are not restricted to a single monolithic do-everything data architecture. You can stream this data using a message bus or like Apache Kafka, land it in an OLTP database, move it to a time series database, also move it to an OLAP warehouse and things like that. The kinds of data use cases for which I would recommend you use a purpose-built time series database is when you have a ton of historical data. You want to keep all that historical data at various fidelities and not blow out your storage budget, because you only want lossy representations of some data that happened 2 years ago. But you need high fidelity for, say, the last 24 hours. Time series databases excel at this sort of very compact, efficient representation of vast quantities of lossy data. And that's not what we do.
Okay, thank you. So let's shift to something more in your wheelhouse. And that is, gee, we've got a lot of people that maybe this isn't something they've even considered for their business. You know, maybe they're starting with something small and say e-commerce, and they'd like to be able to go and make it more efficient, make it more secure, make it more of everything. What kinds of things should they collect as far as their problem? You know, let's call it a homework. What kind of homework should they be doing before they call you at Materialize, so that you don't spend a ton of time, you know, just trying to collect homework?
Our most successful users, the ones that get to wow as quickly as possible, are those that say, I have this SQL query. I just need it to always be up to date. So if you have a database, if you have an application running with a database today, and you're saying, oh, gee, this one query, I only get to compute it on a pipeline once a day. I wish it was just always up to date. We can do that for you with very minimal re-architecting whatsoever. The other way to think about this, for those who have more mature architectures, is would you like to simplify and get rid of some of your more low-hanging fruit microservices? Not every microservice needs to be a microservice. Is the next microservice that you have on your roadmap, could that just be replaced by a single materialized view? That will allow you to focus your development, your limited development efforts and budget on the few that can't be, right? So you probably have 10 that you want to build. Can we model 7 of them or 8 of them as SQL queries and then build those in a very rapid fashion, allowing you to focus on the 2 that really require a bunch of bespoke application logic?
Cool. Well, let's kind of dig into that a little bit. Can you share some examples, some success stories of how Materialize has made a difference? You can change the names to protect the innocent if you'd like.
Yeah, so we have this amazing payments processor, and they have many payments that they process, and they have fraud models that were running in batch. So these fraud models were updating on a continuous loop over all of the input signals that they have in terms of account logins, in terms of transactions. And they had built a very sophisticated payment model that took about 30 minutes end to end to load into a batch processor and update the signals, and then feed those signals back into shutting down accounts that were suspected of being taken over or hacked. And 30 minutes is a very long time for a fraudster to get away with a lot of mischief. With Materialize, they're able to move that down to sub-second or single-digit seconds, since they get these fraud signals. So it's really about taking those sophisticated models that they've already built, because a lot of these models do get built based off of data exploration, data analytics in a cloud data warehouse. That's when you're saying, that's funny, that data point is correlated with bad activity, and this is the thing, if you had this data point and this data point, that's when we really should know. And that ends up a lot of the time being modeled as SQL queries. And we really want to take that very same SQL query that you came up with in the exploration phase and just put it to production without having to unpeel it and then rewrite it as a Java microservice.
Super cool. Well, hey, we've got viewers all over the world. Are there any kinds of things people need to keep in mind if they're not in America, or say we have GDPR issues because of Europe? What kinds of things should people be asking themselves as they start throwing an email or a chat session at Materialize? So, just so that you're asking the right questions.
That's an excellent question. We have cloud regions in Europe where GDPR came from, and customers in Europe. If there's an AWS region in your location, then we can likely work with you. If you can use a cloud data warehouse, we can work with you. There are, of course, some use cases, national security ones, for instance, where they are very strict about data domicile. That we're not yet ready for. We hope to be one day, just as the cloud data warehouses have gotten there. But we would love to work with any users who have any SQL queries that they want to keep always up to date.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Arjun. Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. Thank you so much for being here. Since we're running low on time, I did want to give you a chance to maybe tell the folks at home where they can learn more about Materialize, how they can get started, maybe interested in moving some data over.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. You can find us at materialize.com. Head on over and you can sign up and try it, or you can read our documentation and take a look at some of our case studies or our architectures.
Fantastic. You said try it. Is there like a try before you buy kind of thing?
Yes, there is a online trial. And today we're still in early access, but we are onboarding folks every single day, and we hope to one day have a completely seamless login, try it, get some free usage.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best staying enterprise and IT podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my wonderful co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you?
Well, apparently I'm helping on MegaCon. That's going to be a lot of fun. I always enjoy people watching. There's all kinds of really, really, really interesting costumes walking by. And more than likely, I'm going to be helping with the Learn to Solder section. So it ought to be fun. In fact, I just bought myself a new Ryobi 18-volt cordless soldering iron that is the best. Wow, it's so cool. I can't wait to be able to not have to plug in a soldering iron. Wow. Anyway, I've got all kinds of things happening, and I'd love to share it with you and all our viewers. I still use Twitter. I'm kind of a dinosaur. But my Twitter handle is ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. And I share all kinds of weird and wacky things that I'm doing. You're also welcome, because we would love to hear your opinion on shows. I try to book by threads, different major subjects, but we want to hear your opinions. So feel free to throw an email at me. I am Cheebert, spelled CheeBert at twit.tv. And you're also welcome to throw an email at TWiT at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. Want to hear your opinions? I've got pretty thick skin. If you didn't like what I did, fine. I'm more than interested in hearing your criticisms too. Take care and be safe, everybody.
Thanks, Cheebert. Well, folks, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what about you? What's coming up in the coming weeks? Where can people find you?
Well, I'm going to be writing. I've got several things that I'm working on. I'm going to be talking to a lot of people around the industry, moving from cybersecurity awareness training. Going to be working a lot on risk quantification over the next few weeks. I got a lot to do there, and have a number of other things planned for the remainder of the year, including, but not limited to, professional cybersecurity training and cyber ranges. Nothing like a good cyber range to make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So lots to do. You can follow me on Twitter at KG4GWA, on Mastodon, KG4GWA at mastodon.sdf.org, or on LinkedIn. I put plenty of stuff up there and would love to have a conversation with any of the TWiT Riot on any of the social networks.
Thank you, Kurt, for being here and all that you do. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on enterprise and IT news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. It's easy. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the notes, the co-host information, the guest information, of course, the links that we do of the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, right there next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices, any one of your podcast applications, podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, you name it. Subscribe, support the show, because it's really the best way to support the show. Of course, you may have also heard we also have Club Twit as well as another way to support the show. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus Twit Plus feed. And that Twit Plus feed, you can't get anywhere else. Can't hear it anywhere else. And guess what? It's only $7 a month. There are a lot of great things that come with Club TWiT. That feed is one of them, but there's also this exclusive access to a members only Discord server. In fact, I'm on it right now. We're having a lot of fun topics. I'm talking about a lot of fun stuff on there. So definitely join that Discord server. Be part of the fun. You can chat with hosts, producers. You can chat with Leo. You can chat with separate discussion channels. Special events go on there. Lots of fun stuff. So definitely join Club TWiT. Be part of that movement. Join it at twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, Club TWiT also offers corporate group plans. That's right. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. And the plans just start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 each per month. And you can add as many seats as you like after the fact. And this is a great way for your IT department, your developers, your tech teams to stay up to date with access to all of our podcasts. And just like the regular memberships, they can actually join that Discord server and get the TWiT Plus bonus feed as well. So twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, after you've subscribed, you can impress your family members, your friends, your coworkers with the gift of TWiT, because we talk about some really fun tech topics. And I guarantee you, they will find it fun and interesting as well. And if you've already subscribed, definitely have them subscribe as well and support the show. Now, if you have subscribed and you're available on Fridays right now, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, we do the show live. You can watch the live stream at live.twit.tv. You can come see how the pizza's made, all the behind the scenes, all the fun stuff, all the banter before and after the show. So come be part of that fun. And of course, you can always jump into our infamous IRC channel as well. That's right. We have an IRC chat channel, and it's been there for a long time. And there's a lot of amazing characters in there. And that's irc.twit.tv. You can do it on your web browser, or you can use whatever IRC client you have. And of course, join the TWiT Live channel, and you can be part of that conversation as well. So definitely join them. Now, I also want you to contact me. Just like Brian, I want you to hit me up on Twitter. It's twitter.com/LouMM. There I post all my enterprise tidbits. I have lots of great conversations. In fact, I also have my Mastodon account, LouMM at twit.social. Of course, I'm Louis Maresca on LinkedIn as well. I have a lot of great conversations there. Plus, I have some good topics about even what I do at Microsoft. In fact, Michael Dameron reached out to me just recently. Michael, I promise I will respond soon. Lots of questions coming up, but lots of good topics you brought up, and I want to give you some information about that. So thank you for reaching out. You can always reach out to me. I love hearing from you. And if you want to know what I do at my normal work week at Microsoft, check out developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post all the amazing, great ways for you to make Office more productive. And if you are on Microsoft 365, check out your Excel instance. There's an Automate tab. That's right. That's my tab. I love that tab. Check it out. It's a lot of fun to use, and a lot of cool things can happen if you do use it. So definitely check it out. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all their support over the years. And of course, thank you to all the engineers and staff at TWiT, because they make it easy for us. Thank you, guys. And of course, thank you to Mr. Brian Chee one more time, because he's not only our tireless co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the show bookings and the plannings for the show, and we couldn't do the show without him. So thank you, Cheebert, again, for all your support. And before we sign out, I want to thank our editor today, because you know what? They make us look good after the fact. They cut out all my mistakes. So thank you very much. And of course, thank you to our TD for today, Mr. Anthony, because he has done a fantastic, seamless job. It makes our lives a lot easier. Thank you, Anthony, for all your support. Well, folks, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I am the host of Hands on Photography here on TWiT TV. I know you got yourself a fancy smartphone, you got yourself a fancy camera, but your pictures are still lacking. Can't quite figure out what the heck shutter speed means? Watch my show. I got you covered. Want to know more about just the ISO and exposure triangle in general? Yeah, I got you covered. Or if you got all of that down, you want to get into lighting, making things look better by changing the lights around you. I got you covered on that too. So check us out each and every Thursday here on the network. Go to twit.tv/hop and subscribe today.